So here's the point. It's not actually about Israel. It's about the components of the American right.
Right.
Who are defending mass murder in Gaza.
Your premise is that they're doing mass murder of people in Gaza. I think that there are conservatives who would just reject that premise and say that's not actually happening.
Okay, if you can't say that, then you are endorsing collective punishment, aren't you?
Video really exposes is not just a disagreement between Tucker Carlson and Matt Walsh, but a moral rupture on the American right that can no longer be papered over with slogans or silence. When Matt Walsh says he doesn't care about what is happening in Gaza, Tucker is right to force the issue, because indifference in the face of mass killing is not neutral. It is a choice. And when the United States is materially, militarily, and diplomatically enabling the destruction of civilian life, that choice aligns you with the violence whether you admit it or not. Saying "I don't care" does not lift you above the bloodshed. It allows it to continue uninterrupted.
You explain who you're fighting against and why, and I nodded along in agreement. I really was the choir to your sermon. I thought you're describing the people who defend the war in Gaza perfectly. They don't believe in absolute standards of truth at all. What they're committing in Gaza is exactly what they decry correctly when it happens to other people. You can't kill innocents. They didn't do anything wrong. Not on purpose you can. Period. You're not allowed to do that, but they defend it fully. So they don't believe in an absolute standard of behavior at all. They don't believe in truth. It's dependent upon circumstance. Like, in fact, you've even seen people say it out loud. You know, we raised an entire generation correctly to believe that slaughtering people because of how they were born is the greatest sin, which it is. I believe that. And now we're being, hoisted by our own standards. And my view is, no, standards are absolute. It's either true or it's not. And it's universally applicable or it's not a real thing. It's just it's identity politics. That's exactly what I hate. And identity politics is the kind of political expression of the worldview that you have just decried and declared war against. And God bless you for doing that. But that is in full flower on the right. And I don't want to dignify people by naming them, but people I know who call themselves like MAGA conservatives are defending the murder of innocents. And by the way, some of them suggest, we just move the refugees into the United States because that's good for the country that they support. But is that good for us? That's an attack on American identity.
The status quo is not peace or ambiguity. The status quo is families buried under rubble, hospitals destroyed, children starved, and an entire population subjected to collective punishment. Silence in that context is not humility. It is permission. The heart of Tucker's challenge cuts directly to first principles. Either human beings possess individual moral worth, or they do not. Either children are not legitimate targets, or they are. Either moral standards apply universally, or they are nothing more than tribal branding. You cannot build a career condemning collective guilt, identity politics, and inherited blame at home, then turn around and excuse the mass killing of Palestinians by treating them as an undifferentiated enemy collective. That is not conservatism. That is moral opportunism. It is the abandonment of individual moral responsibility, precisely at the moment when it is most inconvenient to uphold it. The human shields argument, which Walsh implicitly tolerates, and which much of the American right openly deploys, is where this collapse becomes undeniable.
You're also describing, by the way, in a lot of ways, Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela, who we're all required to hate, and I'm not supporting him, of course, but this is like the most socially conservative country in Latin America that has banned abortion, banned gay marriage, banned gender transitions, banned usury, banned, loaning at crazy interest levels because it destroys people. I don't think he's done a good job running his country. Obviously, he hasn't. But to your point that, we should be open to talking to people who share our most basic values, how is he not on that list? Oh, shut up, you communist. But I'm not a communist. I'm not going to be bullied by your dumb labels.
Tucker's analogy is devastating because it is simple and honest. If criminals take hostages inside a school, you do not flatten the building and shrug your shoulders. You do not absolve yourself of responsibility by blaming the hostage taker. The decision to bomb civilians is still a decision, and international law does not disappear because war is difficult or because an adversary behaves criminally. Collective punishment is prohibited precisely because it annihilates the distinction between guilt and innocence. Once you accept that logic, there is no moral flaw left.
Not yours, but I'm anticipating the many attacks. I have been attacked for saying that, but it's true. So what's the answer? Do you see what I'm saying? So I guess what's blowing my mind is that I thought I was speaking the same language as a lot of people that I disagreed with on the margins, like about, what's the best way to harness capitalism to help people? I mean, these are real debates. And then I realized with the war in Gaza that, these are people who don't believe in Western civilization, because Western civilization can be boiled down to one concept, and that's the individual. If someone does something wrong, we punish that person. We don't kill his kids. Why do we do that? Why is that our standard? Because we believe that God created every person as an individual, and every person will stand before God alone to account for his life. He's not responsible for what his children do, what his ancestors did, what his forebears might do. He's responsible for himself because we believe in the individual soul, not the collective soul. And that's what makes our civilization unique in the history of the world. And it derives from Christianity, from the Christian belief of the individual soul. And I see all these people who clearly don't believe that. So how are we on the same side?
This is why the clash matters beyond personalities. It reveals how parts of the American right have quietly abandoned the very civilizational claims they make about the West. If Western civilization means anything beyond empty rhetoric, it means that individuals are not morally interchangeable, that guilt is personal, and that power does not grant moral exemption. When those principles are discarded for Palestinians, they are not being suspended temporarily. They are being confessed as conditional, tribal, and expendable. The video also makes clear why this is not merely a foreign issue. The United States is not an observer. America funds, arms, and politically shields this campaign. That reality transforms apathy into complicity. You cannot say, "I don't care," while American weapons, American money, and American diplomatic cover sustain the destruction. At that point, this is not about Israel alone. It is about whether Americans are willing to confront what is done in their name. Fence-sitting becomes a way of avoiding responsibility while continuing to benefit from the...
So this is where we can be friends on the same side and disagree, because I wouldn't agree with everything you've just laid out there. I think now, last time we talked a little bit about Israel, and my take at the time was I really don't care.
Right.
I just don't care. I honestly don't care.
I want that take bad.
Yeah,
I don't want to care. I don't want anything to do with this.
That's still my take. That's always been my take. It upsets people on both. This is one legitimately on both sides of the Israel issue. People get mad at me for that because they say that, well, if they're very pro-Israel, they say, well, you're being a coward and you need to stand up and support Israel and talk about how Israel's our greatest, most important ally and all this stuff. But then on the other side, very much it's, well, no, Israel's the great Satan. They're the most evil country in the world.
Right.
They're responsible for everything bad that happens. And which is something that I think some people legitimately really do believe at some level.
A lot of people believe that,
right? And so then they say to me, well, you need to stand up and say and say that. And again, my response to that is, first of all, don't tell me what to say. Okay, I have my own mind.
Amen.
So don't tell me what to say. I will say what I want to say, and I can only speak from my own opinion. This is my view, and I think. And we'll get back to it, but not to get sidetracked. This is one thing, by the way, that's making political conversation in this country impossible, is that all anyone ever does anymore is impugn the motives behind the argument that you're making. So you make an argument, and then everyone goes, well, you're only saying that because... And it's like...
The empire's comforts. Tucker's broader point about fractures on the right is unavoidable. This is not about left versus right. It is about whether moral language is real or performative. Many of the same voices who built their platforms attacking identity politics, collective guilt, and moral relativism now excuse or minimize mass civilian death when it is politically inconvenient to condemn it. That contradiction is not accidental. It reflects a media and political ecosystem where certain loyalties are enforced, certain topics are policed, and certain silences are rewarded. The issue is not whether Matt Walsh is personally cowardly. The issue is whether a media class that claims courage is willing to apply its principles when doing so threatens its alliances, audiences, or access. This is why I don't care cannot stand. In a moment of mass killing, indifference is not a philosophy. It is an abdication. It tells the victims that their lives fall outside the circle of moral concern, and it tells power that it can proceed without consequence. If you believe life is sacred, you do not get to suspend that belief when the victims are politically inconvenient. If you believe children should not be slaughtered, you do not qualify that belief by nationality, religion, or usefulness to empire. The video forces a reckoning, and that is why it matters. You do not have to agree with Tucker Carlson on everything to recognize that he is right here. You cannot sit this out. You cannot outsource your conscience. You cannot claim moral seriousness while refusing to name mass killing as wrong. This is a moment that demands clarity, not comfort. Courage, not neutrality. Reject apathy. Reject the narratives that anesthetize conscience. Stand on the side of life, dignity, and justice for all people. Subscribe to our channel to stay grounded, stay informed, and stay committed to truth over power.